Good day, everybody. It is the 4th of December, and I'm going to turn this entire process over to Maya. And you get to take it away from here because I don't want to cut into your time. Thanks for doing this for Casiopa's webinar series. The title is on the screen for those of you seeing it, and so I will turn it over to the person you want to hear from, not me. Take it away.
Excellent. Thanks, Steve. So, hi, everyone. My name is Maya Basdeo. I am a candidate for a Master's in Environment and Sustainability at the University of Waterloo. I am so lucky to have Steve here as my advisor as well. And so this is a presentation about part of my research on a survey I did with hunters in Canada about conservation. And this is not a new topic for me. I've been working on kind of nature-based outdoor recreation and conservation issues for quite a few years. I did my undergrad thesis with Steve as well on if hunting leads to a greater conservation ethic. I am a conservationist, an outdoor recreationist, and a hunter myself, so I have some, genuine interest in this topic. Okay. So funding and support, most of my funding, well, all of my funding has come through graduate level scholarships, TA-ships, and grants. In particular, I'd like to thank OGS and the Queen Elizabeth II Graduate Scholarship in Science and Technology, and also the School of Environment, Resources, and Sustainability. I've had a lot of support through grants and TA-ships over the years, including a UW President's Award. I have worked through the surveys with hunters in Canada, and I will mention that I have not received any funding from hunting or conservation organizations or individuals for this research. So the research question is, I'm just going to see if I can hide this thing here. So the research question is, do hunters in Canada participate in conservation? And if so, in what ways? So I was really interested in getting perspectives directly from hunters about what they do. And the survey focused on basically behaviors and opinions that hunters have about conservation. The survey was anonymous online. I conducted it last year, kind of between October and November 2023. The survey was live for about 6 weeks. And the platform I used was Qualtrics. Was fairly easy to use. I did translate it and have it translated into French, so it was bilingual. It was distributed across Canada, and no incentives were offered. It was distributed primarily through hunting and conservation organizations. Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters was the big one, so thanks, folks, for doing that, as well as a number of other provincial territorial hunting conservation organizations that you will see. So the Manitoba Wildlife Federation, Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation, the Alberta Wildlife Federation, BC, and Yukon Fish and Game. And so the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters sent it directly through email to their member list. And I think that had about a 50,000 person reach. And then they also posted it on social media. The other organizations also posted it on through their online newsletters and on their social media platforms as well. So I knew I'd get some responses. The results, I got a lot of responses, more than I expected. Over 4,000 responses were received. And then, after cleaning the data, I ended up with 4,022 valid responses. 60 of those were 100% complete. And then the remaining 100 and something were more than 55% complete. And basically, that completeness relates to the content around conservation primarily and hunting questions. And so I did receive responses from every region in Canada, which I was pleased with. The majority did come from Ontario. And, the survey I had, because it's exploratory research, the survey had some open-ended questions where, for multiple choice questions, for example, there was a category of other, please specify, because I thought, well, there might be some categories that I'm missing. And I didn't expect to get that many responses, but I got between 2 and 500 text entered responses. And then I had the last question of a 23 question survey. The last one was, is there anything you would like to add or clarify? And I thought, well, I'll get, maybe 100 responses or so. And I got over 1,500. So I, I can't analyze it for this master's. I will be analyzing that in subsequent work. And the sample, again, it was exploratory, so it's a non-probability sample. And folks, you might know this already, but in case you don't, hunting is an activity that's regulated by provincial and territorial jurisdiction. So it was more important to me that to get a reach of opinions from across the country rather than try to get a known sample like I would have done using licensed data, for example. That would have just not been feasible in the course of the master's here. Here's a map. I discovered Excel can make maps. This map indicates the number of valid responses received by jurisdiction. And so you can see Ontario has an overwhelming majority of over 3,000 responses, and Nunavut has one. But the point is there was some distribution and some responses from across the country. And here is a table that basically based on the number of people who responded. So I mentioned that 4,022 responses were received in total, but the questions other than informed consent were not required. So there was 3,964 responses of people who identified their province or territory of residence. And so here you see again, Ontario has 83%. And this is just to keep in mind because when we view the responses, I'm not confident. I don't know for sure if the responses that we see are consistent with hunters across the country, or if there might be differences regionally between different provinces and territories. And so maybe the results might be more representative of Ontario hunters. So some demographic information I wanted to share just to give us some context. 6% were female, 94% were male. I was a little surprised by this. I'm sure I've got more than 200 women on my Facebook page that are hunters, but I was not allowed to post the survey link using my own social media. It could be that this represents more membership that we can see in OFAH, like OFAH membership has about 5% female and 95% male. But in Ontario, for example, the split is about 35% women, 65% men in terms of hunters. So just to keep in mind. And I mean, the survey did go. I mean, once the anonymous link was live, it was distributable and shareable on various social medias. But I'm just not sure how many other folks might have seen it. I did ask the age in terms of age categories of respondents. I included the youth category because all jurisdictions in Canada do have some form of youth hunting license or permit. And in order to get a license, a hunting license or permit, you do have to take some form of hunter safety and education, hunter ethics, some kind of a course or something. And so I didn't want to exclude anybody. But you can see there's quite a difference. Most people are over the age of 46. that responded to the survey. Again, I'm not sure if that reflects all hunters or if that reflects membership in hunting organizations. I was curious about voting tendency. 60% of respondents to the survey noted that they were conservative, but not all. 16% were nonpartisan, and then the remainder were kind of distributed between other parties. I did not specify on the survey if this was uh, federal tendency or provincial tendency. So there's, in the other category, there could be other parties that are provincial or territorial that are not mentioned. And again, just as we're going through the data, I have the number according to the number of responses according to either the question or the statement. Residence location, do people live in an urban setting, suburban, rural, or are they remote? And this is Ontario. I broke this out of the data countrywide. It's somewhat similar, although uh, um, there's probably a little bit more urban and suburban residence locations in Ontario compared to other parts of the country, but not much. The results are fairly consistent. Um, and what I found interesting is only 41% of respondents identified rural locations. And in the survey, there were characteristics associated with what it means to live in an urban, suburban, rural, or remote setting based on things like population, commuting distance to a city, if you had a rural postal code, and things like that. So there were characteristics that people could think about. Hunting types done most often. I used a kind of a common sense approach to, I tried to anyways, to the categories here. 90% of hunters, deer moose. I mean, the top three are deer moose, upland birds, migratory and waterfowl, which is a federal license, by the way, and turkey. And, part of the reason I wanted to know this is because I'm curious to know if there's a link between certain kinds of hunting and certain kinds of conservation actions. Do people eat what they harvest? 93% do. And actually, if you look at the results, quite a few people do also donate some or all of their harvest to others. And then support for hunting or conservation organizations by category. So the question on the survey was, which of these organizations do you support by membership, subscription, or donation? And the top box is basically a bucketed summary. 97% of respondents were a member of their provincial or territorial angler and hunter organization. And then 66% belonged to a national conservation organization. And those are organizations like you'll see on the bottom box, the top four categories of respondents selected. The two national conservation organizations are Ducks Unlimited and Canadian Wildlife Federation. But I also included things like Nature Conservancy of Canada, Delta Waterfowl, Canadian Wild Turkey Federation, World Wildlife Fund Canada, like the big organizations. I just didn't want, there's like 25 items to choose from. So I didn't want to put that graph on the screen because it would have been quite hard to read. And then of course, most folks are part of their local angler and hunter organization. This would be like a rod and gun club. And then, by name, OFAH, no surprise, 78% of respondents were members of or subscribers to OFAH. and then nationally DU and CWF. So in summary, when we're considering the results and perspectives of the hunters that participated in the survey, most of them are from Ontario. 94% are male, 6% female. Most are over the age of 46. They tend to vote conservative, but not entirely. The residence locations are fairly spread across mostly rural, suburban, and urban settings. They hunt for deer, moose, upland game, migratory birds, turkey, belong to hunting conservation organizations, and also support national conservation organizations. So this is the interesting stuff. What kinds of conservation activities do you participate in? And this is a kind of a breakdown of what hunters participate in. 60% make their property wildlife friendly, followed by mentoring others in conservation practices and ethics. So, you know, the least participants do things like species reintroduction or landowner partner and habitat stewardship, and that last one really was like I included the examples of partnered with Nature Conservancy or ALICE, which is the Alternative Land Use Services. And so the kinds of stuff they do are things that they can control, boots on the ground, on their own property, what they can do with people they know, and their own kind of volunteer experience. And then there was a question, this is again bucketed. There was a question that asked about indirect support for conservation. So this is not boots on the ground. This is more, what kinds of things do you do that lead to conservation support? I combined the yes, usually category with the sometimes category because I was interested in seeing, if people are interested in getting hunters involved in conservation or including hunters in conservation, what kinds of things might they be? So a lot of folks, most folks, purchase licenses and permits, whether they're going to hunt or not. And this is things, whether it's your kind of your small game license, your big game license, different tags for different animals. A common one is migratory bird hunting permit, which is like your duck stamp is basically what folks refer to it as. But then there's quite a bit like donating money, voting choices that prioritize conservation, and being again a member or a subscriber to a conservation organization. Having a career or job focused on conservation is not as prevalent. Neither is sending letters or comments to government. So hopefully this will help kind of direct conservation efforts. And of course, I was curious to see what are some of the barriers to participating in conservation. And I did include answer options like, well, it's not a priority or I'm not interested, but those were not selected by very many people. I mean, it's not zero, but it's also not a majority of folks. The big barriers are time and money. And, that's probably not so uncommon for a lot of conservation participation, even outside of hunters, right? And then there's a few folks that are not sure where to begin. Asking hunters about what they think are threats to wildlife or natural places. And loss of habitat is the number one. And then you can see, I mean, there's, a lot of threats. They're kind of almost in kind of three tiers of threats. So you see the top four, which is why I've indicated them, just by number because there's so many. But the top four are kind of the ones that most respondents identified. And then there's the middle things like industrial development, climate change, and an overharvest of resources. And then the last few. I asked to what extent hunters agreed with some statements. So the next few graphs are what are called matrix tables, and so basically it allowed me to combine a few questions into one question, and respondents were able to select their answer to each statement on a Likert scale. And I think this is also a bucketed one. It was a 5-point Likert scale on the survey. And the color corresponds to the statement, because in matrix table questions, there's one question, multiple answers, but not every survey participant was required to answer or to rate the extent to which they agreed for each statement. So that's where you'll see the number and the percent beside each bar. So 97% of people who answered that hunting is an activity harmful to conservation did not agree with that. And then, but they did agree with the others statements that hunters do have valuable knowledge and experience that can be contributed, and that hunters should participate in conservation. There was not a lot of neutrality, which is why I bucketed these responses. And then, looking at how closely some of these statements describe people's feelings. I didn't bucket these, but they, do not describe my feelings for all of them to various extents, right? So, I'm only participated in conservation with people who share the same political beliefs. And, that is a hopeful thing, especially if anybody's paying attention to the news these days and things seem polarized. But really, when it comes to conservation, there's potential to work together regardless. And then again, only being interested in conserving wildlife species I hunt or not interested about conservation, that doesn't describe how hunters feel, the ones that responded to the survey. And then similarly, on the opposite end of the spectrum, most hunters either clearly or mostly care about all species and habitats and consider hunting to be a way to connect with nature, which is, part of the reason I'm doing this research is sometimes these nuances about how people feel and how they view conservation are missed. So in summary, hunters engage in a range of conservation activities, mostly property improvement, mentoring, and volunteering. They do indirectly support conservation through licenses, permits, donations, voting choices, etc., but least likely to write comments or to have a job or a career that's focused on conservation. Time, money, and not knowing where to start are the main barriers. And they do recognize that there's a range of threats to nature and wildlife. They view hunting as a way to connect with nature and don't agree that regulated hunting threatens conservation. And the question on the survey was regulated hunting by government issued license or permit. They do agree that hunters have valuable knowledge and experience to contribute, to share, and that all hunters need to participate in conservation. They would collaborate with others of different political views and care about conserving all species and habitats, not just the ones that they're interested in harvesting. And that last point, I think, is a key for conservation in Ontario and Canada. And of course, I'd like to acknowledge every single person who participated in the survey. I would not have a project if I didn't have participation. So thank you to everybody who did that. Dr. Stephen Murphy, of course, hands down, has been my advisor for undergrad, grad studies, future grad studies, and has been just incredibly supportive and sets the bar for academic supervising, I think, hands down. Also, Derek Armitage, who is my other committee member. A huge thank you to the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters for support in this project, for sharing the survey, with the other hunting conservation organizations, in particular, Angelo Lombardo, Matt DeMille, Sean Cayley, and Jane Beggs have been just really super to work with. And then the other hunting conservation organizations who shared the survey in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC, and the Yukon. Again, I mean, it just really does help get the message out there. And so if anybody happens to have any questions that occur to them later, please do send me an email. This is my email, maya.basdeo@uwaterloo.ca. And that's it. So I am happy to take questions if there are any.
All right. Thank you very much. We have time for at least one question, maybe two. I do end this at 10:30 just because of the restrictions on
Yeah.
Zoom and stuff, but we'll be fine for that. If anybody's got a question, by all means, you can unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, I have a quick question. This has been super interesting. It's really nice to get this perspective because, especially for working in conservation, it is a perspective we don't necessarily get all the time.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if your research factored in the whether hunters think they need to do more for conservation or not. I find a lot of discussion around this has hunters, now this is just a personal observation, overstating the actual contribution they have towards conservation. Especially in the sector that I work at, the hunters' contributions to our organization are negligible compared to, large donors from other areas. So I'm just wondering if that was factored in to what extent that they feel their, donation or support is used, or how impactful it would be within the conservation sector.
Yeah. No, that part was not. I didn't share all of my research, but there are, yeah, not all. I would say there's there are some ways that are easier for hunters to contribute than others. But I don't know if I think there's opportunities, Aaron. I mean, overstating their participation. There was a Conference Board of Canada publication done recently about contributions hunters make to the economy. And I think hunters feel like the ones that responded anyway, and certainly folks that I've known over the years, feel they contribute and demonstrate they contribute, but they also don't necessarily feel very well understood by non-hunters involved in conservation. And so I think that there's always opportunities to do more and to maybe be involved. And maybe there's ways, I mean, maybe there are barriers in your field that you may not be aware of. But I do think that starting with organizations like hunting conservation organizations that have memberships could offer opportunities for greater collaboration. I don't know if that entirely answered your question. Um, did it
Yeah, I
answer
think
your
that
question?
did. I and that kind of sprung to mind. Sorry to take questions from other people if they have them, but um, we do like we have a very obvious barrier to hunting within our organization. Like the lands that we protect cannot be used for hunting. It's more of a federal regulation than an actual something that we necessarily put on our own lands.
Yep.
So there's a definite barrier there.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
guess
I mean, just to interrupt quick, I mean, I don't think that it's based on what I found, I don't think that it's necessarily accurate that hunters only want to participate in conservation if it's going to directly benefit them. But I think, part of the way we speak about hunters could be a barrier that we're not aware of, right? I think there's always opportunities for groups to work together. I think it's about, like, it's like a Rubik's Cube, right? It's like finding the formula that works. And so
Yes.
maybe there's other ways. Steve, are we out of time?
We are, which was I'm just going to say that's a very thoughtful exchange, actually, and I think that's sort of something that bears some fruit. Again, I'm going to thank everybody for participating. And obviously, you shared your email on the screen so people can
Yeah.
follow up if you like to on this side of the equation.
Yeah, please email me, and
then,
I'm happy to and also I'm happy to quickly chat with anybody. If anybody wants to jump on a call, I'm happy to do that. I can't see the messages in the chat, but I see that there's a red bubble.
yeah, their messengers thanking you, which is
super
I
awesome.
agree.
Yeah.
And again, I would encourage people to email Maya directly in terms of what goes on. So thank you very much for participating. I'm going to end off the meeting to be respectful for everybody's time and also the limits of our recording. Make sure you don't get cut off. And we're going to go from there. So thanks a lot again. We got another webinar coming up next week. Actually, it's on the website, and then we'll have one in January too, which will be kind of nice to conclude this next round. So thanks everybody for participating, and do follow up with Maya if you like. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Steve.
Bye-bye.